Welcome to Physiology 3062W, the research paper for physiology majors class. This presentation will be an overview of the project. I am the course director, Dr. Barnett. During this class, you'll write and research a term paper based on a topic of physiology. For most of you, the paper will be focused on a topic that you've picked, then research published literature for relevant papers. There may be a few of you who have lab-based research projects that you'd like to write about. You'll need permission from your principal investigator, the faculty member that runs the lab, if you plan to write about your research, and you should discuss that as soon as possible with that person who runs your lab. As you know, this class is mostly independent study. That means that after the first few weeks of the semester, there won't be any formal lecturing material, but you will continue to work on the project in consultation with your faculty advisor. I recommend that you check on the Canvas site at least weekly for information from me or for reminders for deadlines. If you miss a deadline for something that needs to be submitted for the course, then you can lose points which will count towards your grade. I'll try to post the narrated versions of the PowerPoint presentations as close to possible when the class is offered. And for those of you who are coming to class, I think that's a good opportunity. For those of you who can't come to class, this is a place for you to find out what was said during the class sessions. The whole idea here is that I will present what's expected for the project, how to start your literature review and to connect with faculty advisors, how to build an outline for your paper, and how to use your outline to turn it into a rough draft. And finally, I'll give a presentation on how to turn your rough draft into a final draft. If you already know who you want to work with, then you should confirm that they're available. And then I will be posting a link on our website where you can let me know who your faculty advisor is for the semester, because during the semester I'll need to contact them about deadlines and about grading or editing or evaluating your project. So your objectives for this class will be to select a topic. The topic should be physiologically relevant, to search for recently published scientific papers on your topic. This is even if you are doing a laboratory-based project. You'll then search for after you've got your papers together, you may use a few of them as part of your focal point. For those of you who are doing a purely literature-based research, then this will be your core for the final report. You'll need to read those papers and try to understand them to the best of your ability, and this is one of the reasons why we ask you to work with a faculty member, because if you get to a point where you don't feel like you understand exactly what the paper is trying to get across, your faculty member can be a sounding board and can provide you with some feedback. As you gather your information, you'll want to try to organize it into a way that's going to help you to construct an outline, and eventually your outline will become the draft of your final paper, which will be revised and at the end of the semester submitted as your final paper. In picking a topic, you should think about what's physiologically interesting to you, and it should be related to human physiology. However, I think that research using animal models should be encouraged. We learn a lot from animal models, and there are some reasons to gravitate towards animal models or even computer models because they can sometimes provide insights that would be difficult to get in clinical or human research because you can ask more detailed questions and be more invasive in the collection of data. So don't be afraid to use an animal model. Your topic can be, but does not need to be, related to a disease. But if it is related to a disease, think about what the health problem is, what's the physiological system that is affected by that health problem, and it might be helpful for you to review what you've learned in Physiology 3061, the Principles of Physiology class, about whatever that system is, so that it can help to define some of the parameters that you'll need to look for. Your faculty advisor will discuss your choice of articles with you, discuss their content. They can also evaluate your outline once that's put together and the draft of your paper, and give you a critique that will not be graded, but will give you some insights into how you can improve each of those points of the development of a final paper. And finally, the advisor will be the person primarily responsible for assigning a score to your paper, which I will use to calculate your final grade. When you are doing your literature review, we would expect you to look for recent papers, that is, papers published in the last 10 years. The reason we ask you to focus on recent papers is that if you find a really excellent paper that's 20 years old, it's likely that more recent work has built on that study, and that you can benefit from finding the more recent study so that you can have something that really resonates with contemporary medicine and contemporary biology, and not something that's historical footnote. You can, we have wonderful tools. You can use PubMed, which is publicly available, Ovid Medline, which you will need to access through the Biomedical Library site. Google Scholar is also publicly available. There's lots of different search engines for scientific papers, but I do encourage you to use the search engines that are scientifically focused and not just generic Google searches. When I say something that is basic science literature, what I mean is something that is designed to answer a hypothesis, or a hypothesis statement has been set out. This is what we think will happen, and then the experiments have been designed to try to gather data to address that hypothesis. It'll include background information or information on what informed the people who designed the study to feel like they could answer or provide new information on a particular topic. It will also include their research techniques, their analysis methods, the major results of the study, graphs and tables that show a tabulation of what they found, and then a discussion of what the results say and what they might mean to the larger field. Review articles can be useful to help provide some context. Clinical case studies can tell you whether or not particular approaches have clinical relevance, but they are typically not considered basic science literature. And you should not, while you can get some feedback or some information from medical websites like WebMD or the Mayo Clinic website or even Wikipedia, those should not be primary sources for your research report. That encyclopedia type information should only be used for background information. So this process, once you have a topic, starts with looking through the literature and trying to find a couple of papers that might be useful. One of the first things that I do when I do a literature review, and we'll talk about this more in about 2 weeks, is that I'll look at the titles of the papers that come up as a result of my search and see if some of them fit the criteria that I'm looking for. If the titles seem interesting, I'll go further. I'll start looking at the abstract areas. If you glance at these images of the front pages of research articles, you'll see an initial paragraph section. Those are the abstract areas, And the abstract areas tend to give a overview of the entire paper, from what the problem is, how the authors approached it, what kind of results they thought they were able to acquire, and how they analyzed the data and came to a conclusion. If that still fits the criteria that you're interested in, then maybe you can select a couple of those papers to be your primary sources for your research report, and then move forward with your work. Before you begin to write, you have to read. And you should read the papers that you've started to collect and try to understand what are the important points of each paper and that you're reading, and how does it fit into the article that you would like to write. Some of the information may go into your background section or introductory section. Some of it may be methods that you'll need to report upon. There may be critical graphs or tables that you'd like to include, and as you read the papers, you can start to identify those elements and try to make notes that are going to help you incorporate that into your final paper. We'll talk about reading papers and using that information that you find to create an outline in a future class session. You'll want to know things like, what was the author's hypothesis? How did they design their experiments? What are their key results, and how did they interpret their data? Here's some thoughts on scientific writing. William Zinsser has said that writing, thinking, and learning are all the same process. It's a way of manipulating the information and being able to explain it to others, and it helps to learn the material if you have to write about the material. Antoine Lavoisier, many years ago, said that it's impossible to dissociate language from science or science from language, because every natural science always involves three things: a sequence of phenomena on which the science is based, the abstract concepts which call these phenomena to mind, and the words in which the concepts are expressed. To call forth a concept, a word is needed. This simply says, if you want to describe something accurately, you have to put together the words of our language that make an accurate description, and that are going to mean something to someone else when they read it, so that they'll understand it the way that you understand it. Once you get your papers together and you've read them and you're starting to build your paper, you will start to write an outline. And for this project, I will insist that you write an outline before you write your draft. In your outline, I expect to see clear sections that include introduction, methods, results, discussion, and you'll need a bibliography that refers to the sources that you use to gather that information from. If you write an excellent outline, it makes it very easy for you to write your draft, because all you have to do is go to your outline, look at the section, and say, okay, this is information that I need to elaborate on in my paper, and start to write the paragraph that refers to the sections of your outline. And as you do that, you'll start to build a narrative that will eventually become your paper. Once you have an outline, you'll get some feedback from your advisor on whether it's well organized. You can reorganize it, and once you've got it reorganized, you can start to write your rough draft. And as I said, it's just filling in the details. A good outline helps to write a good first draft, and a good first draft helps to write a good final paper. You'll submit that rough draft to your advisor, and the advisor will make some comments, and they may ask you to rearrange some of the information in the rough draft. They may ask you to eliminate paragraphs or change certain clauses of sentences, or reuse or find better words to define particular parts of the paper. But hopefully all of this will help make your paper clearer, and then eventually you'll take that information that you got from your advisor from their feedback and use that to craft your final draft. And if you've addressed the issues that they bring up well, it means that you're likely to get a good score on the final report. So, just to recap, you're supposed to pick a topic, search for recently published papers, narrow your search to 1 or 2 papers that can be the focal point, read those papers and try to understand them, as well as select additional papers that can provide support material. Organize your information and create an outline for your research paper. Fill in the blanks of your outline to create a rough draft, and then revise your rough draft into a final paper. Late in the semester, when your final paper is submitted, these are the criteria we're going to try to grade it on. Your introduction and hypothesis statement, which will include background information, as well as the major question that the paper is going to try to address. The summary of your major papers. So if you've got 2 major papers, we'll ask you to talk about their experiments and their results, and your summary will be worth another quarter of the points for the paper. You'll want to also include how the authors interpreted their data, and your review of their interpretation will be factored into the scoring, as well as your own analysis of the information that you've read over several papers, and you'll have to be able to make a clear statement about whether or not the initial question that these papers were meant to address was addressed well. While the quality of writing is always important, we will try not to make an assumption that you're a professional writer. We'll allow you to have some errors in quality, but still try to grade you more on content than overall quality. However, that doesn't mean you can write a sloppy paper. If you write a paper that's difficult for your faculty advisor to read, that's going to affect how they judge every other section of the paper. So pay attention to explaining things clearly. That's all we're asking. Okay, so finally, this is Friday when I'm recording this message. I meant to do it earlier in the week. I apologize for that. You should try to get your assignment into the Canvas site this evening. It's not a very difficult assignment. All I'm asking you to do is to submit a topic or two that you find interesting about physiology, and maybe this will be one of the topics that you might explore for your research paper. You should think about maybe things that you've seen on the news, things that you may have seen on a website, something that you may have heard from friends or in a class. And then if you have an idea and you've also already looked something up, you can provide a link on that. I will be collecting all of the topics that students submit, and I'll discuss them in class on Tuesday. I hope that this overview helps you with getting started on this project. On Tuesday of next week, I will start giving an overview of some of the faculty who you can use as support advisors for this project, and in addition to the topics that students have presented, and we will try to get you started on that process to find a faculty advisor. Thank you for your attention.